What the bomb diggity is up, yo? Welcome back to Forever Backlog, the show where I review my gaming backlog as I go through it for your viewing pleasure. So today I'll be talking about what is the first game I actually picked out specifically to review on this channel. I'm actually planning on making a separate video explaining what the method is and what goes into choosing what games I play and what gets reviewed on the channel, so I won't bore you with all the details now. I will, however, tell you why I picked this game in particular off my backlog and why I thought it would be interesting. But in order to do that, we need our big dramatic reveal.
Behind you!
So in this episode, I'm reviewing Season 1 of Telltale's The Walking Dead. First off, let me just say, don't worry, there will be no spoilers throughout the video, and I'll try and keep the gameplay footage as uneventful as possible. Also, if you're out of the loop and me saying that Season 1 bit has you confused, let me just break it down in my intro thingy. The Walking Dead was originally released by Telltale Games between April and November of 2012. A later, I guess you can call it, add-on episode was released in July of 2013. The Walking Dead followed Telltale's now characteristic episodic format, comprising of 5 original episodes plus the other one I just mentioned. Telltale had been putting out games this way some 5-6 years before The Walking Dead and seen some success, be it with the likes of older franchises such as Monkey Island or Sam & Max, or based on series such as CSI and Wallace & Gromit. It was with the release of The Walking Dead I feel that they hit their stride, delivering a game that was very well received by critics, just as the TV show was starting to break through in popularity. They have since continued to take on other established series and game franchises such as Game of Thrones, Fables, Borderlands, and Minecraft, as well as a second series of episodes for The Walking Dead, hence why they are now known as Seasons 1 and 2. Now, why did I feel this would make for an interesting review? To put it simply, because I'm not a fan of The Walking Dead. Technically. Let me explain. I don't like the TV show. I tried, couldn't get into it, found it utterly obnoxious. I even tried watching the first episode of the new spin-off series on a whim and still hated it. But this game takes after the original comics a lot more than it does the TV show you might be screaming at your screen right now. This is true. I've just never read any of the original comics. I have a couple of friends who swear by the original comics, and as a default, I'll always trust that the original source material is much better than the adaptation. It's just that I can't personally vouch for it because I've never read them. This is why I thought it would make for an interesting review, sort of like a public service type thing. So welcome to the non-fan review of Telltale's The Walking Dead. First things first, as I just mentioned, the game follows the original comics a lot more than it does the TV series. You can probably tell that they even went for a familiar art style if you've ever looked at the comics. However, the story merely unfolds in the Walking Dead universe with its own unique characters and storyline, so there's really nothing you need to know beforehand except that there's been a zombie outbreak and what a zombie is. In fact, the story starts just as the outbreak begins and the characters themselves have to make sense of what's happening, so you don't even have to know that. Now with all of that out of the way, what about the game itself? The Walking Dead is a graphic adventure game with a heavy emphasis on storytelling. It plays almost like an interactive novel. My first instinct was to try and play this like a traditional point-and-click game, as I would furiously scour the background for hidden items to use in later puzzles and exhaust every dialogue tree and such. If you've played a Telltale series before, and well, I had not, you'd know that that's not the way the game is meant to be played at all. Here the focus lies more with actually progressing the storyline and exploring the characters, and not so much puzzle solving and looking through every nook and cranny. You will simulate this eventually, of course. I'm just mentioning it because it could have saved me a bit of time in the beginning. Most of the input asked of you as the player is in the form of dialogue choices and certain courses of action, as well as some quick time events for certain sequences. Right off the bat, that might turn a few of you off, as this really is not a genre that will appeal to everyone. We're definitely entering interactive storytelling territory here as opposed to a more traditional gameplay experience. Which is not saying it's not engaging, but some of you will prefer a more hands-on endeavor, something that demands more of you as a player. We've established that the meat of the game is its storyline and character progression, that's what we're looking for here. So let's talk about that. The plot is divided into 5 episodes, each with its own theme and setting, which then combine to work as a complete story arc. It deals with very familiar concepts like trusting the right people, resource management, and surviving as a group. In my opinion, it gets off to a very slow start. Not in terms of action, mind you, more like none of the characters clicked instantly with me. They all felt a bit boring or typecast. It was only after spending some time with these characters that I really began to care about them all. That, and I felt like the intrigue also takes a bit to really get going, and then come the more interesting scenarios, and that's when the game really hits its stride. Because of that, I also felt that it was over longer play sessions that the game excelled for me. Not that it takes very long to beat anyway, but it's at its best when you allow yourself to get immersed in it. Most of how you interact with the game is through your own choices, who to side with, where to go, how to best serve the interests of your comrades. I like how for the most part these weren't cookie cutter, obviously good or obviously bad choices. Instead, these mostly played off your own feelings towards the characters and you betting on certain outcomes within the story. The fact that a lot of them are timed, forcing you to make important decisions on the fly, is something I resented at first, only to later acknowledge how they managed to keep the tension up and not let you relax too much. Plus, at the end of each episode, they show you what percentage of players made the same choices as you in some of the bigger decisions, which I thought was a neat feature. And as I said, this is the bigger chunk of what you're actually doing and what you'll take away most from the game. And as such, this is what would inevitably make or break the game, and I feel it was executed very well. How the choices can be very ambiguous, and how you're forced to go with your gut feeling a lot of the times, mimics the tension of what a scenario like this would feel like in an engaging experience. Besides that, what's left are some quick time events scattered throughout. They didn't feel too egregious or intrusive here, whatever. It's worse that we've come to expect these as a standard in a genre like this, whereas I'm sure the industry as a whole could come up with a better concept. But that's a topic for a longer discussion. Now, the game does all of this while still maintaining a very characteristic comic book look and feel. I very much enjoyed the art style and how they got the game to look. On the one hand, it feels like it stops you from taking everything too seriously by having it look the way it does. And on the other, you have the contrast of seeing stuff like people being mauled to death or eaten alive presented to you in a very characteristic, almost cartoony style. You could say the art style both takes away and adds to the bizarreness of the situation in equal measures, creating something unique in the end. As for the story, well, there's nothing groundbreaking here. It's not one of those things where I felt I couldn't put it down. But at the same time, I felt intrigued enough to carry on and see what these characters would get themselves into next. The pacing was good for the most part, and overall the game felt like it had the right length to get you invested, but not totally burnt out by the end. So dear viewer, what does all that mean to you? Should you move The Walking Dead up or down on your backlog? This is gonna come as no surprise, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. It all depends if you're really a fan of The Walking Dead or not. Now, as I said in the beginning, I'm not a fan and I still had fun with it, but I'd say you're okay with leaving it in the old backlog for later if the series really doesn't mean that much to you. On the other hand, if you are a fan of The Walking Dead, I'd say move it up, as you're more than likely to get a much bigger kick out of it. That, and you already have a second season to get into, plus you'll want to avoid spoilers. If I were to sum up my entire experience with the game, it would be something like, I dug it. It's got cartoon zombies, a worthwhile plot, and it's not too long. If you're looking for something to wow you or something that demands more of you than just directing the plot, then you'll be disappointed. But if you want to spend a few hours going through an interactive zombie comic, then give this a shot. And that's another episode done! Let me know what you thought of the video, of the concept of the non-fan review. And if you're thinking, I don't comment on YouTube videos, I'm not some weirdo, I'll have you know that not commenting on YouTube videos is the leading cause of heroin addiction worldwide. Look it up. Alright guys, thank you all so much for watching, take care, and I will see you all soon. Now, like I said in the beginning, I'm not a fan, and I still had fun with it, but I'm...